The Business on RTE Radio 1 with Ulster Bank. For when you're keen to know what Brexit means for your business, visit ulsterbank.ie/Brexit.
Well, this week again there was more bad news on the aviation front, from CityJet making staff redundant to news of job cuts at Dublin and Cork airports. Meanwhile, planes all over the world remain grounded. Domhnal Slattery is the chief executive of Avalon, one of the world's largest aircraft leasing companies, that happens to be 10 years old this week, and he joins me now. Domhnal, obviously 10 years old with the company. 2010, you started in a crisis, and I suppose the business, you find yourself in another one now.
Yeah, good morning, Richard. Yeah, it is indeed a crisis, and I think one of from our perspective, one of epic proportions. It's significantly more challenging than the great financial crisis. In fact, the CEO of Airbus a couple of weeks ago described it to me as, he said, this is a bit like 9/11, SARS and the financial crisis all merged into one. So it's unquestionably a most challenging environment for us in the aviation industry.
Now, planes are grounded pretty much in most of the world around the place. When we often don't think about it, but you're an owner of planes. It's what Avalon does. You own them and you rent them out, or lease them out to airlines. Where are these planes? Do they have to be protected, covered? Can they be damaged? Will it be difficult to keep them safe when they get going again?
Yeah, so there's about 24,000 commercial aircraft in the world. And at the moment, 90% of those are grounded and being maintained on the ground by the airlines. The big issue for us, Richard, in the industry will be how many of those aircraft will go into long-term storage. And our estimate at the moment is that there's probably 4,000 too many aircraft in the world for the next couple of years. And so when those aircraft are put into longer-term storage, it becomes quite an expensive exercise. I mean, think of it as storing a 737 will cost $30,000 per month, multiplied by 4,000 aircraft. So it's a very significant financial burden that the airlines will be facing globally.
I presume some of these planes are at the side of airstrips in the desert, wherever it is.
Well, at the moment, the vast majority of the airplanes are at airports, but when they're put into storage, they're generally moved to locations in the world, like, for example, the Mojave Desert, in the United States, which is one of the largest and safest from a sort of a safety perspective, from an atmosphere perspective. So yeah, it's going to be good business for the aircraft storage guys for the next couple of years, not good for the airlines.
Now, as a plane leasing company, you have found, and you've said this when you announced results recently, that a very large number of your customers, the airlines, are saying, look, we're not flying these planes. We pay you X amount per month to lease it. Can we not pay you? I mean, how serious an issue is that for your business and others in that sector? Because presumably you have to service the debts that you have in order to acquire the planes in the first place.
Correct, yeah. So, think of an aircraft leasing company as almost a middleman between the banks and the bond market and our customers, the airlines. We borrow from one market and we lease the aircraft to another. So at the moment, as we disclosed in our recent earnings, almost 80% or more of our airlines globally have sought deferrals. So they just simply don't have cash. And so we've been working, I would say very constructively on a global basis. But at the same time, we've got to balance our cash flow needs because we have to continue paying our banks and our bondholders. But I suppose from an Avalon perspective, the good news is that we entered this situation, as in the COVID situation, in robust health. We had over $5.5 billion of liquidity on our balance sheet. So we believe, based on the most draconian forecasts, and they're pretty draconian, that we can survive through this crisis. And trust me, in our industry, there will be no winners in this. There will be just survivors. And along the way, we're going to lose airlines, and we will lose aircraft leasing companies that don't have the balance sheets to weather the tsunami.
What's your take, Domhnal, on when you think international travel will get back to, let's say, 2019 levels? How long do you think it will be?
Yeah, so think of the world as domestic and international, right? And the biggest domestic markets are China and the United States. We are seeing green shoots in China. Our team in China reported into us overnight that traffic is now 20% higher this week than it was even 4 weeks ago. And we're seeing green shoots in the States for bookings in the second half of this year. But that's just domestic. International travel, we believe, will take at least 2 to 3 years from now to recover to last year's levels. And Barclays Bank in the United Kingdom did a very extensive survey last week, talking to business people, leisure travel, and the results of that survey were quite startling, particularly for the business travellers, which are saying 40% of the respondents saying they're going to put off business travel indefinitely until there's either a vaccine or a complete elimination of new cases of COVID. So we're very, very pessimistic on the prospects for international travel, but it will recover because demographics will push it there, but it's going to be a real challenging 2 to 3 years ahead.
In the meantime, during that 2 to 3 years, are we likely to see a kind of halfway house where people can travel but might not feel safe? Depends on where they're going. They might not feel, if it's for a holiday, do I really want to go there? Are the bars going to be open? What are the risks associated? But also, do you think we might see a new version of flight shaming going on?
Possibly. I mean, flight shaming was becoming a very central issue in our world last year, and indeed the whole environmental piece. But maybe just there's one fact I'd like to share with you, Richard, that people probably don't know, and it's important that people have facts. You talk about inside an aircraft. Is it safe? Is it not safe? Well, the aircraft air filtering systems in airplanes are extremely sophisticated. And the air is filtered within an aircraft 20 to 30 times more frequently than in an average office, and 5 to 6 times more frequently than in a grade A hospital. And the filters that are in these aircraft are 99.9% effective in trapping airborne particles and other biocontainments, such as the COVID. So it's important that people actually understand that tube is actually the air in there is very clean. The challenge, of course, is that, going from your home to the airport, there's so many different touch points along the way that that's quite the challenge. So, but ultimately, I think people will start to travel again. They'll balance the risks and the rewards. They'll look at the facts. They'll look at the mortality rates and the demographic profile of that. And people will want to get back to living life. We've all been contained and isolated now for, nearly 2.5 months. And I think there'll be a desire to sort of get back to some form of new normality pretty quickly. The
other big challenge for airlines, which I suppose indirectly feeds into your own business and industry, is that if there are so many restrictions as to how many people are on board the plane, whether it's passing each other, going to the bathroom, not going to the bathroom, all that kind of stuff, they have to ask themselves, can they make money? And then the only way they might make money is by increasing prices. And that in turn, will discourage people from flying. So that's a longer term problem, isn't it?
It is. It's a longer term structural issue. And, this middle seat debate, I just don't think it has any validity. I don't think it makes the plane any safer. The reality is, in my view, that the airfares are going to go up, and they're going to go up pretty significantly, over the medium term. The other side of that argument, though, Richard, is arguably that airfares had gotten to a point, particularly with the low cost and ultra low cost fares, that they were uneconomic for a lot of airlines. In other words, they were basically loss making. I mean, look at Norwegian Airlines, teetering on bankruptcy, just about surviving. But literally every international aircraft they flew, they were losing money. So there's a rebalancing that will go on in the world as to, what is the right economic price for an aircraft seat.
And in that rebalancing, Ryanair's Michael O'Leary has come out very strongly against the idea of governments bailing out what he would see as competitor airlines. Where do you stand on that issue?
Yeah, I've got a pretty fundamental view on this, and I think you have to break it into two buckets. One is the responsibility of a government to protect the employee, the aircraft mechanic, the flight attendants, the cabin crew, etc., to try and preserve their ability to live on a week-by-week basis during the crisis. And so that type of social support I am 100% behind. And, we've seen that play out throughout the world. I am not a supporter of governments bailing out the equity or the ownership in an airline, because all that does ultimately is distort competition. And, Michael O'Leary is correct on that point. But nevertheless, we are seeing governments in Europe and in different parts of the world stepping in and bailing out on the equity side airlines. And it's hard to stop that because these airlines are national champions, flag carriers, politically very relevant. So I don't think it's stoppable, but I don't think it's the right business model.
Okay. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Domhnal Slattery, Chief Executive of Avalon, thank you very much for joining us on the programme.